Welcome back. News and Talk 1380 WAOK, the voice of the community. You can call on 447-226-1380. Get you involved in the conversation. Attorney Robert Patillo sitting in for Dr. D. Dawkins Hagler today. One more day in the saddle. Great talking to everyone. We're on this topic of how do we fight back? How do we push back against this extreme MAGA agenda? We've seen President Trump has now said the Supreme Court can't do nothing to him. Who gonna check me, boo? He has taken over and changed the leadership of the entire United States military. He has an obsequious Congress that will do nothing to constrain him. He can control the economy with a tweet. 2,000 points up, 4,000 points down, market manipulation. Him and his friends get rich. He's purged the federal bureaucracy and asserted MAGA loyalist as it laid out in Project 2025. He's gone through this process of outlawing and pulling up by its roots diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives throughout the federal government and throughout private industry and universities. And joining us to talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what they're doing to fight back against this extreme Trump agenda, we're joined by attorney Elsie Guerrero. Attorney Guerrero, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm outstanding. Okay, so you're one of the nation's foremost experts on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you kind of explain to people who just hear the negative phrase DEI, what exactly these programs are?
Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion is really the terminology. It's not DEI. They made DEI a negative form, a negative abbreviation. Excuse me, just kind of like DUI. So we got to call it diversity, equity, inclusion. And these are actually programs that are supposed to help create spaces for populations that are normally not in there. It's not just African Americans, Latinos, Asians. It's also your veterans, your disabled, white women. So it's places for anyone who needs some form of representation. For example, 3 years ago, I got hired to work in Congress. And I was hired through the Diversity and Inclusion Program, which was removed in 2023, shortly after I was hired, during when the Republicans controlled the House. But I was hired through the Diversity and Inclusion Program, and I didn't have any connection in Congress. Mm-hmm. And so this is a program that was there. I came in with 4 degrees, came in there with certifications, participated in other programs that are intended for minorities. So I came in qualified, but when you're in a pool of other racial groups, other genders, other socioeconomic class, sometimes you get lost in the barriers and your qualifications may not always be looked upon. So this is a place.
And I think on that point, I think that's really important for people to key in on, because the administration has made it seem like, all these unqualified black and brown people that we're trying to get rid of, and we're going to move it to merit-based. What do they mean when they say merit-based? Because it seems that merit-based is my cousin, people I went to school with, folks in my same fraternity. That's only merit that they need versus having actual cognizable, specific metrics for what people need to get into some of these programs and institutions.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either, because I can tell you right now that Diverse Staff Association put out a statement about women of color in the congressional staff leadership. There is 435 members of Congress, not including those in the U.S. territories, the delegates, and there's 100 senators, right? And according to last year, 2024, there were only 8 African American or black women communication directors. This is just women. 0 Asian communications director, 7 Latina, and 2 Middle Eastern, and no Native Americans. And in my role that I had, legislative director, there was 13 African Americans, black women. This is only women. This does not include men. 7 Asians, 8 Latina, 1 Middle Eastern, and again, 0 Native Americans. And if we're going to go by merit-based, let's look back at history. Who was in the United States first? Mm-hmm. Native Americans. And they have no representation in the U.S. House of Representatives, in Congress as a whole.
And so on that point, we're seeing all these attacks. We're seeing them trying to pull these programs out of universities, out of law firms, out of the government, etc. All these programs that really built the black and brown middle class, that allowed second generation people to go to universities, get educated, get high paying jobs, put their kids through college, and really build and live that American dream. So what's being done right now to try to protect those things? Because it seems that all we're hearing about is these onslaughts against it. But what's the resistance? Who's fighting back right now, and how can people learn more about fighting back?
Well, right now there's a lot of nonprofits fighting back, and of course a couple of Congress members. Congressman Jonathan Jackson created the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Caucus to try to bring more members of Congress to come over here and fight back on this executive order to ban any federal resources on diversity, equity, inclusion. You also have the Congressional Black Caucus, who also just recently recreated the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. You also have individual members of Congress, the Tri-Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, as well as the Congressional Asian Pacific Islander Caucus. So we do see a lot of the race group members of Congress, race and ethnicity, I should say, out there fighting and sending a lot of letters out there. And not only just for race and ethnicity, we also see in veterans. One congressional member, he just sent out a letter to the Department of Defense on their disappointment of getting rid of resources and funding for veterans. As I said, it's not just race and ethnicity, it's also people who served our country, almost died for our country, being removed. I think we just lost, 4,000 veterans in there. Don't quote me on the number, but we did lost over 1,000 veterans have lost their employment in federal government, and these are people who have served our country. What's interesting, Department of Education is also being attacked. They want to, get rid of it. They want to take it to the states. But we also know that schools, we deal with racial segregation. We know that areas with high minorities tend to have low fundings and don't have the best schools as in more affluent areas. So we see a lot of elected officials out there fighting stakeholders. I think it's really going to be up to us, the people, to go out next on our midterm election in 2026 and vote the right people who are speaking our language and fighting the battle. I don't know how much can be done during this current administration. It's really tough when money is behind a lot of these forefronts. But I think the people have to go out there, protest, go knock at the doors, go bug the people who are against anti-diversity, equity, inclusion, and ask them, is your mother white? Do you have a disabled cousin? Did your father serve their country? Let them know who is actually diversity, equity, inclusion, and really try to mold it. I think it's really up to the people, because there are organizations out there working, like the Lawyers Committee, Latinos, Unidos US is what they're called. The Southern Law Poverty Center. I'm saying there's so many
Southern
organizations.
Poverty Law. You're right. I think there's so many people out there who are kind of fighting in these silos, and they just need to be brought together. But it's just interesting to me that every emergency creates an opportunity, and I think that what we're going to see over the course, particularly leading up to that 2026 midterms, is we're going to see an entire generation kind of rise up. Those millennials who are now hitting their late 30s and early 40s, those Gen Zs who are in their late 20s and getting into their 30s, and they're looking at this situation, they're looking at the old guard of leadership, and they're looking at the opportunities that have presented themselves, and they're saying to themselves, well, if they can't do it, if they're the ones who got us into this ditch, if they were the ones who had their hands on the wheel, while a madman seized the reins of government, well, then it's my turn, it's my duty to stand up and fight back against this. I encourage every listener to dig deep down and find out, if you can't think of who's supposed to be the next leader, then why shouldn't it be you? That the majority of the civil rights movement was not marches by Dr. King and the big televised events. It was people sitting into lunch counters in their own community, boycotting the Woolworths, saying that they weren't going to get up from their seats. Rosa Parks wasn't the first one. And there is no leader. You become that leader today. Thank you so much, Attorney Guerrero. Really appreciate you joining us. Hope you can join us again to talk more about some of these issues. You're one of the nation's leading experts on this. I think it's important that people find out exactly what is actually happening.